welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. So glad that you are here with me. This is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to rock retirement. And you know the way that you do that, don't you? It's by focusing on the right things. That can be hard. And taking lots of intentional actions to create a great life. And so that's what we're going to talk about each week. Now, this month in the Retirement Answer Man Show, or on the show, we are in a hard at work mode. And so let's go talk about that with the most amazing coworker ever, Nichole Rockstar Mills. Nichole, I need a nap. Will you start this one off?
Okay, you just go lay down over there, and I will welcome you all to week 3 of Hard at Work October. We have been getting really excited for 2020, planning out our podcast schedule, working hard for our upcoming rodeo roundup in the Rock Retirement Club. We're going to have people coming in from all over the country, and we're super excited about that, getting to meet some people face to face. We have also got planning for the RRC and what we've got coming in 2020 there. So we've pulled some older episodes. I guess first, while we're talking about the Rock Retirement Club, Roger, we should probably mention that we have some pretty big news coming up there.
Well, we have the Rock Retirement Club retirement course, the RRC retirement course, which is going to be the most comprehensive retirement course ever created in the history of the world to help you on the history, in the history.
No wonder we're tired.
I need a nap.
Like, that bar is pretty high.
I know. No, I'm hard at work creating the course step by step from the feedback of the Rock Retirement Club. So we have a roadmap to figure out how complicated all this stuff is. And this is also a mini membership drive because November 1st, we are raising the entry fee to the Rock Retirement Club. And if you lock it in before November 1st, you're locked in at that rate forever. So you can check all that out at rockretirementclub.com. Can I go back to bed now?
You can go back to bed now. So for this week, we pulled an older episode where Roger actually talks about identifying his personal values and how identifying your values is really a critical step in creating the retirement that you want. And this one is actually special to me because it was one of the first episodes I listened to when I was interviewing with Roger and considering going to work with him. So it was kind of the episode that made me think, this guy's pretty cool. I hope you enjoy it too.
So I've had the privilege over 25 years of being a financial advisor, a financial planner, of having conversations with couples a lot like you that are contemplating what retirement or freedom will look like, how they're transitioning into it, and what the rest of their life is going to look like. Part of that discussion is always about, the normal things, right? How much do we need to retire? Will we run out of money? What kind of lifestyle can we live? How much investment risk should we take? How should we manage the assets? All those normal planning questions that, we read about so much. What I found interesting, however, is that a lot of those conversations end up becoming about what do I want for the rest of my life? Or better said, who do I want to be for the rest of my life? Because if you think about it, well, you probably know this. If you're in your 50s or older, all of those roles that we've had to do are winding down a little bit. We had getting an education, getting a job, starting a family, moving up the corporate ladder, having kids, raising great kids, having a great relationship with your spouse, moving up the corporate ladder, saving for the future, all of this building to serve all these roles that we had. And for a lot of us, retirement or these more independent years become the first time that we can really, one, I'm going to say we could have done it before, but we didn't realize it. I understand that now. But we're seeing retirement or these independent years as the first time we can really live life and do the things that we want to do. It's about us and how we build a life for ourselves on our own terms now that we've played all these different roles. That's a lot of what the discussion becomes about. So then the question becomes, well, who am I? What do I value? And what do I want this life to be? Some of us are more intentional about thinking about that. And I would argue that the ones that aren't end up living lives that may not hold as much meaning or have as much impact as they hoped. So these meetings with clients end up becoming about, what do they value? What is it are the things that are important to them? Because if we understand those things, making decisions about what to do in all those tactical things, right? Portfolio and when I retire and all those other things, making those decisions become a lot easier once you really get down to what it is they care about. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about values and what you care about. But before we do that, we got to have that all important disclaimer. That's right. It's time for the all-important disclaimer. Don't take advice from Roger Whitney on the show. In fact, don't take advice from anybody on a podcast or anybody that doesn't know anything about you, right? Doesn't make any sense. I only give advice to people I work for as a fiduciary, where I understand their situation, so I have some currency to be able to speak in their life. And I don't know you, and you don't know me, so think of this as helpful hints and education. And make sure before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, your financial advisor, and maybe your life advisor in this case. That's just common sense. Now let's get on with talking about values. Well, in the news today, America's distaste for both Trump and Clinton is record-breaking. That's right. We're in the middle of the presidential elections. And everybody's like, oh, he's going to talk about politics. Well, yeah, kind of, sort of, but not really. I mean, as of today, Real Clear Politics poll says that the two candidates we have, Trump and Clinton, are the most unfavorable, unliked candidates of any presidential election in recent history. So according to the poll, 65% of likely voters don't view Trump as favorable. And we hear words like liar, mean, womanizer, corrupt, a loose cannon. People don't like him. Clinton currently has a 55% unfavorable rating based on the Real Clear Politics poll. And we hear words like liar, mean, corrupt, above the law. So it doesn't seem that the two candidates are aligned with what we value as individuals, which is interesting because, at least in theory, the process goes through the two major parties. These candidates were elected through the primary process and are the best candidate in those respective parties. Now, we can argue whether that system works or not, but it's a little interesting that we are sort of the ones that put them there. Yet there's this disjointedness between how unfavorable both of them are, and we're the ones that put them there as our two main choices for the next president of the United States. So I think this is a good setup to really decide, do they really represent what you and I value most in our personal lives? Are they a representative of who we would want to be? And if not, how do we start to correct that? Where do we start first in making sure that we live and act in harmony with what we care about most and what we say we care about most? Well, let's talk about what we mean by living in harmony or being congruent in how we live and what our values are.
Huh? What does that mean?
Welcome to the What Does That Mean segment, where we take a term and we define it so we understand we're all on the same page, and hopefully we're more informed to make better decisions in our life and in our money. So today's word is the word congruence. So what does congruence mean? Based on the popular online dictionary, which I did not copy the URL for, so you'll just have to trust me on this, congruence is the state achieved by coming together, the state of agreement. So when we talk about values, the question becomes, if you say you value A, B, and C, are you living a life that is congruent with your stated values. As we approach independent years, are we planning a life that isn't congruent with what we say we value most? So here's an example. So when I was in my 20s, I was a pretty sharp guy. Got out of college. I made probably more money than I should have earlier. I had some success, and it all went to my head, literally. If you would have came up to me and asked me, hey, Roger, what do you care about? Oh, I love my wife. I love my children. I want to be financially free and prudent. I want to live with honor. I want to be brave in my life. Those were the things I probably would have told you that I cared about, right? Now, let's look at how I was living. And now that I'm 49 and I look back at this life, I see I said I cared about family, right? But I was a jerk. I was grumpy. I was self-absorbed. I was not happy with who I was. I was not happy about a lot of things. And I took it out a lot on my wife and on my kids. This struggle or this whatever it was inside me, I just wasn't a happy guy. And I was disconnected from my wife and from my kids for a period of time, especially my wife. I talked about financial freedom. They wanted to be prudent with money, yet I would buy nice suits. I can remember when I bought a BMW 529. I was like 28 years old. I thought I was it. I can remember driving around Dallas with the top open, just thinking I was all that, right? And that car was exactly opposite of what I would tell you my values were. In fact, to this day, my wife does not like BMWs because to her, a BMW represents, because of that period of time when I bought one, not a good picture of who I was as a man. So to her, to this day, that's what a BMW represents. That takes her back to the kind of man I was when I bought that car. Now, I said I valued honor and bravery, yet I was in a toxic work environment and I stayed there way too long and let things happen to me. So what I would say was my values, if somebody were to ask me, I wasn't living a life congruent with my values. And I think that is where a lot of my discontent and anger and unhappiness came from. I didn't understand it because I never articulated my values. But I think internally, my internal values were hardwired and I wasn't living a life. I was living a lie. And I think I was not living a congruent life. And I think that's why there was so little peace in my life. Because if we're not living a life that's congruent to our values, there's not going to be any peace. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about values and why congruence is an important concept. So what happens if you start living a life that is more congruent? Welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life. And we're talking about what happens if you start to live a life that's more congruent. I'll just talk about me. I'll continue this story, and maybe you can relate to it, is as I started to walk a journey towards living a life that was more congruent with what I knew I valued, but I never articulated, what I found was I started to gain more peace in my life. I started to be more confident about who I was as a man. And here's the important part for a lot of us right now. All these are important, I think. But now that we're in our 50s, if I'm 49, if we're in our 50s or 60s, and we're looking about what the rest of our life is going to be, where we're going to have a chance, we're going to feel like we have more control over living a life on our own terms. As I lived more congruently with my values, what I found was my path, the clarity on where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be and how decisions were made was a lot greater. I had clarity, which brought peace. And I think that's the key thing that we need to think about as we're making this transition. Because from my perspective, I'm just going to tell you right here, you may not realize it yet, that as you're planning for independence, or transitioning to independence or retirement. This is a bigger change than you may appreciate. You may get it intellectually, but having walked that journey with so many clients, it's a bigger change from an emotional and psychological perspective of living a life on your own terms without having a lot of obligations and roles put upon you. So how do we go about getting a good foundation for all these profound changes that are coming? Well, if you've listened to this podcast for any period of time, you know that I'm working on being very intentional about investing in myself. And I encourage you to be intentional about investing in your relationships, investing in your skills, investing in your health. And part of investing in your health is investing in who you are as a woman or as a man. So for me, this podcast is part of doing that. This is a passion of mine, and it helps me become a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better friend, and a much better advisor to my clients. It's part of mastering myself so I can have a greater impact on the people I'm able to walk life with or speak into their lives about. So as part of that journey, I was introduced to Robert Mallon and Bill Watkins, who are two very cool guys who are in their 60s, early 60s, and they are very accomplished. Robert has a great pedigree as a corporate executive and speaker and trainer, an organizational guru. Bill Watkins was a former Olympic cyclist on the Olympic training team. He's owned businesses. He's been a CEO of a business. They have a lot of wisdom, and they've walked very intentional lives. And the two of them got together when they got out of the corporate world. And to them, they identified what their values were, and they started something called Rusty Lion Academy to be able to speak into other people's lives and help them. So they're professional coaches. And so I engaged them in helping me master myself in building the skill sets I think I was deficient in, slightly deficient in, so I can have the maximum impact in my business and also with my family. So part of investing in myself. So what I want to share with you is the steps, the first initial steps that I've done on this journey that I think would be of real value to you. So let's talk about how do we live a life that's congruent with our values so we can have some clarity about making decisions about this retirement or independent decision. Well, number one is you need to identify your top 10 values. And this is according to Bill Watkins and Robert Mallon. Identifying what your top 10 values are, really thinking about them, and then framing them and keeping them top of mind by having them in front of you, writing out how you're going to apply them and what they really mean to you. So not just writing a little list, but also digging in a little bit deeper, but why each one of those are so important. And then the last step that they had me do was, once I've done those things, is to share them in individual conversations with my wife, with my two children, and with a friend or two that I want to be accountable to. So identifying those top 10 values, keeping them front of center by framing them and having them in front of you, mapping out a little bit what they mean to you and how you're going to make them happen, and then sharing them with people that walk life with you, your spouse, your children, and a few select friends. So I'm going through this process. So what I thought I'd do, because I think this is an important process for you, especially as you're looking at transitioning into a more free life, that if you could get your top 10 values down, and maybe you've never articulated them, it can really help give you some clarity in making some of these life decisions that you could be facing or are facing right now in terms of leaving work, retiring, starting a business, all these things that we talk about on the show. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just walk through my 10 values. We're friends, right? I'll share them with you and talk about why they're important to me. And then at the end, in our SMART SPRINT segment, I'll give you a resource that you can use to identify your top 10 values too. How does that sound? So let's do that. So let's go through my top 10 values, and maybe some of these will resonate with you. I tell you, there's a lot to choose of when you think of it. So I have top 10. So I'm just going to go through each one and talk a little bit about why it's important to me. So First value is my relationship with God. That is extremely important to me. What I have found is that as I walk closer with God, the stronger that I am. It humbles me to realize I'm a ding dong, right? I screw everything up so often that I can't do it alone. And my ongoing conversation with him, it teaches me grace, it teaches me courage, it teaches me humbleness, thankfulness. I could go on and on about that. And when I'm focused on having a personal conversation with him, I'm not even talking about going to church if that's not your thing, having a personal conversation with him. When I do that consistently, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better friend, and I'm a better advisor. So each day I try to spend time walking and talking with him. Now, I don't go to church. I don't go to a church on a regular basis, and I'm not prescribing anything to you. You got to make these decisions for yourself. These are my values. But I do have a very close relationship, and we talk all the time. Hey, God, how you doing? I'm talking to him right now. He's with me. But that's a value of mine. That's a foundational value that makes me a better man. Now, value number 2 is one of my top 10 values is quality relationships. I truly value quality relationships. Now, I had struggled with choosing just the relationship with my spouse or with my family, and I wanted to have something a little bit broader because for me, I've always had fewer friends, but deeper conversations. I'm not great at small talk. I've gotten better at it, but I enjoy sitting down and connecting with someone. I have a hard time in big crowds of people. When I'm speaking, it's fine. I actually enjoy that. But when I'm like just making chit chat, I don't talk about sports that much. It doesn't fit me. But I love quality relationships, and it really brings joy to my heart. And I love to hear other people's stories and understand what they do. I have a very curious mind, and I value that. And that's with my spouse and with my children, with my friends and with my clients. I like to get beyond the headlines. And that brings a lot of depth to my life and really helps me broaden my perspective. So that's my number 2 value. And number 3 is adventure. Now, I look at adventure as an attitude. It's being open to new experiences, ideas, and emotions. I've always been a little bit of an adventure junkie, not so much from a competitive nature, but from just loving to experience new things. I think adventure helps me maintain a curious mind and a sound body. I tend to have a knee-jerk reaction if someone says, hey, Roger, you want to go do this 4-day hike? Or do you want to go do an Ironman? Or do you want to go check this out? I'm like, yes, let's do it. And then I'm like, let's get it on the date. I love to say yes to things, and I want to make sure I always maintain that natural curiosity. So that's my 3rd value. Now, number 4 is service. Service hasn't always been one of the values that I would at least overtly talk about. But I've spent a lot of time over the last, especially 4 or 5 years, trying to figure out what my purpose is. And I believe, I truly do, I was put on this earth to help change the concept of retirement and to help people live a more balanced life. And so through my work and through this podcast is a good example of that. I try to help you in turn and also help me live a more balanced and meaningful life. A life with more power and joy and less fear. So one value I want to be acting out every day is service and trying to fulfill that to the best of my ability, because I think that's really important. That's a big part of my why. My 5th value that I identified was continuous improvement. I believe that people either have a growth mindset or they have a fixed mindset. And as we get older, there's a natural current or headwind pushing us into a more fixed mindset. And I see it with clients, and I see it in family members and other people that I meet. As they get older, they get more rigid in what their body is capable of doing, what their mind is capable of doing, what their opinions are, what skills that they have. And I always want to have a growth mindset. I have a good role model. Well, I have a lot of role models in this area. Robert and Bill are great examples, even though they're not that much older than I am. But Dan Miller, who's almost 70, has the most curious mind and is constantly focused on improving his life. So is Ken Davis, another good guy. But I have role models like that, and I want to make sure that I'm always improving because I think that is going to make a happier, healthier life. My sixth value is fitness. Some people that know me real well would probably say, that's probably should be a little higher, Roger. I love fitness. I love to feel fit. I love to exert myself and test the limits of my body. But fitness for me, more than anything else, to be honest with you, helps me mentally. I am not the same person if I am not feeling fit and being active and staying engaged. I get more depressed. I get more negative. I get lazier. I get more pessimistic about life and outlook. So fitness to me, although I love the physicality, I don't even know if that's a word. I hear it all the time. Although I love the physicality of doing things and testing my body, it has much more to do with how it makes me feel overall. My seventh that I identified was laughter. Now, this might be funny. In fact, I'll call him out. Joe from Stacking Benjamins, I always tease him, and now it's a running joke now that he always says that I'm really not that funny of a guy and I'm too serious. So now I always mention that to him when I see him. But I am a pretty serious guy. I get very well. I'm intense. I get very intense, which makes me look not as happy. It makes me much more serious at nature. And I've really been working on laughing more because I feel more engaged and optimistic about life when I'm laughing more. So I'm trying to cultivate a better perspective and create a better atmosphere for others by laughing more, especially at myself, because I can tend to take things too seriously. So that's a value I really want to try to cultivate. The eighth value that I identified going through this process with Bill and Robert is positive attitude. That's something that I want to have. And I think I have a pretty good positive attitude. I tend to not worry about blame, but worry about, okay, what are solutions? How do we keep moving forward? Now, I definitely, with this one, was not always this way. This is something I've really been able to cultivate, but I have seen this with people that I've known that have gone through major medical issues, people that have had financial issues, and life really hit them hard. When they approach it with a really positive attitude, it empowers them. Even if you're fighting against a tide that it seems insurmountable, the very act of looking for opportunities to take action is empowering. Even if it's almost hopeless, the very act of acting forward and trying to find the right things to do really changes the quality of life, even in really miserable situations. So if I can control my perspective and can be a positive person, that's, I think, a big key of creating an incredible life for me. My ninth value that I identified is freedom. So freedom, I was actually surprised that I put this at number 9 because I really value freedom. I value living life on my own terms. And I'm very adamant about that, of not living up to other people's expectations or follow what other people say I should be doing with my life and what quote unquote successful is. I definitely could never be part of a cult because I could never follow a group. I tend to want to pave my own path, and I value my time freedom. That's one reason why I've created a business the way I have. I value my intellectual freedom. I don't like rigid positions. I can see some of the nuances, and that's really where the details are, especially when you're doing retirement planning. And then my last goal that I identified is bravery. So I haven't always been brave. For a very long time, I wasn't brave. I was scared and I was worried. But bravery gives me strength to live out my values. It gives me that fortitude to follow my values when the easy decision is not to, right? Each day, we're faced with little decisions that are very inconsequential in nature, whether it's to eat poorly or to ignore something that is an issue with someone you care about that's annoying you. It's easy just to avoid those things rather than have those tough conversations. And I do that with clients all the time, is I tell them, hey, you're hiring me for me to speak truth in your life, regardless of whether you want to hear it or not. Now, that's easy to say, and it's a value I try to live up to, but I want to please people, and sometimes you have to deliver news or perspective that may not be something that is easily received, but it's something that they need to receive. So I got to make sure I cultivate this value of bravery to be able to do that, because that's how I'm going to have as big of impact as I can in other people's lives and also to create a great life. So I identified my 10 core values. I have them printed. They're coming in on this cool glass thing, so I'm going to have them in front of me. I wrote out a little bit what these values mean to me, and that's what I just shared with you. I haven't even shared this with my wife or my children yet. That's happening over this weekend as we move them off to college. I'm going to take each one of them separately and just have a life discussion and have them hold me accountable to these, so they know that these are the 10 things that I aspire to live up to, that I want to live my life in congruence with, if I said that correctly. And I really love what Robert Mallon from Rusty Lion Academy said. He said, values tell people what is good, beneficial, important, useful, beautiful, desirable, and constructive. They actually help people answer the question, why do I do what I do? And this is the first time in my life I actually have put into form what 10 values I aspire to live up to. And I think that's important. I sort of, okay, we'll go through this value thing when Robert and Bill wanted me to. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. That's part of this. That's part of the process. I'll lean into it. But the more that I've done it and the more I thought about it, I'm glad I did it. And I think for you, as you're working through this new phase of life or contemplating this new phase of life, where your life is going to be more about you and creating a life on your terms as you enter retirement or independence, I think this is even more important because the guardrails are sort of coming off, right? You can make anything you want from it. You could sit around and drink beer and watch football all day long, and that could be your retirement. Identifying your values, especially if you're couples, both of you identifying your 10 values and talking about what they mean to you could be a great fundamental step, foundational step to beginning to dream about this ideal retirement that we talk about on the show. So I think this is pretty cool. And that's why I thought I would go first and share how I went through this exercise. Now, let's talk about a chance for you to be able to do the same thing.
On your marks, get set.
All right, well, welcome to the SMART SPRINT segment, where we define an action step you can take in the next 7 days to take one step forward to creating the life and the retirement that you want. And I talked to Robert and Bill about the worksheet that they had me use that is about 4 or 5 pages, and it really framed it well, and it was really easy to just fill out, and then it gave you areas to expand on what your goals were. So I asked them if I could share it with you, because this is something they use in their coaching practice, and it's something they put together, and it's really well done. And they said, sure thing. So I'm going to challenge you over the next 7 days to go to rustylionacademy.com/answerman, rustylionacademy.com/answerman. And there you can grab this worksheet. It's about 4 or 5 pages. Print it off, or I think it's a fillable PDF. In fact, it is. And go through this process of defining your 10 values so you can really solidify in your mind what it is you aspire to live in a congruent fashion with. I'll have the URL or the website address in the show notes, as well as in 6 Shot Saturday, which will come to you on Saturday morning if you're signed up for that. And I think this will be a great step to really defining who it is you want to be in this new independent phase of life that you're looking at. Hey, I want to thank you so much for spending this half hour or so on the Retirement Answer Man show with me. I know this stuff can seem overwhelming, but I think if you define your values, that will be a great first step. If you are looking for help with someone to come alongside you briefly and speak into your life and help you create a retirement roadmap, that is something I do every day. You can go to rogerwhitney.com and click on Work with Roger and learn about that. Or if you want somebody to come alongside you and actually walk life with you and help you have these little conversations and make sure you're making smart financial decisions as you walk this journey, go to rogerwhitney.com/work with Roger, and we can engage and have a conversation about that. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next week, this is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.